Hi there, welcome back to Westeros.org on YouTube. This week we're discussing episode 8 of House of the Dragon. It's called The Lord of the Tides. And 6 years have now passed since the death of Laena and the death of Laenor. Corlys Velaryon has spent that time at sea, fighting for control over the Stepstones. Now news arrives at Driftmark that he's been gravely injured, leading his brother Vaemond to question the succession of Driftmark. His ambition to claim the inheritance over Viserys Velaryon leads him, as well as everyone else party to the claim, from Princess Rhaenys to Princess Rhaenyra and Prince Daemon with their family, to King's Landing, where Vaemond means to make his petition.
Viserys' health has really deteriorated in the years since we last saw him, and Queen Alicent and her father, Otto, preside at the small council and render judgments from the Iron Throne. Alicent also deals with problems in her family, like most notably Prince Aegon, being a drunkard who rapes serving girls while his mother berates him and covers up his crime. As Aegon meets with the Hightowers to show his willingness to become their ally in return for Driftmark, Rhaenyra and Daemon are pretty shocked to see Viserys' condition, as they introduce him to their two sons that they have, Aegon and Viserys. They try to talk to him of a succession, but he seems really delirious. Later at night, though, Rhaenyra speaks to him alone about Aegon's dream, his prophecy with Songwise and Fire, and how he needs to defend her and her children if he wishes her to carry on that burden.
The next morning, Viserys refuses the milk of the poppy that Otto offers him, and he wants a dinner that evening now that all his family are gathered in one place. He does not expect to live much longer, and sees this as a final chance to try and forge peace between the warring halves of his family. Later that day, Otto sits on the Iron Throne to judge on the petition from Vaemond Velaryon. When Rhaenyra is allowed to respond, she calls it a farce, but is interrupted by an unexpected arrival, King Viserys, wearing a golden half-mask to hide his missing eye and ravaged cheek. He makes his painful way across the room to sit the throne. At one point, stumbling and dropping his crown, he receives and accepts help from his brother Daemon.
I love that moment.
That was fantastic.
The king questions why the succession is in question. After all, the matter was settled. Corlys wanted Viserys to be his heir, and Rhaenys is called on, and she confirms that was her husband's desire, and announces that Rhaenyra had offered to betroth her two eldest sons to Baela and Rhaena, Rhaenys' granddaughters. The king finds for Viserys, which causes Vaemond to rage and openly accuse Viserys of not having Valyrian blood.
I love that scene, too.
Daemon ends up goading him. Say it. And he calls all the sons of bastards and Rhaenyra a whore. The king is very angry, takes out that Valyrian steel dagger, says it will have Daemon's tongue, only for Darksister, swung by Daemon, to take off most of Daemon's head. He says he can keep the tongue.
Yeah, it kind of flops out there for a little bit. Very gruesome. The dinner that evening takes place without Rhaenys, who chooses to stay with the Silent Sisters who are preparing Vaemond's body for his last journey to Driftmark. The king attempts to convince his family to make peace, if not for the realm, then for him. Rhaenyra and Alicent both seem moved by this and offer toasts that honor and praise one another. But Alicent's sons are not done, and when Viserys leaves, feeling unwell, Aegon goads Viserys about his marriage to Baela, and Aemond offers a toast to his strong nephews, which causes a scuffle that's broken up by guards and Prince Daemon. But there's still a chance for peace. Rhaenyra will take her family back to Dragonstone, but promises Alicent that she will return on Dragonback to spend time with her and Viserys, which Alicent seems to welcome.
But of course, that night, as Alicent sees Viserys to bed, the delirious king mistakes her for his daughter, and he answers her question about Aegon's dream. And Alicent, hearing how he talks, seems to come to believe that he's actually saying he wants Aegon, his son, to succeed him. She leaves Viserys, who's moaning in pain, and even says, no more. And then he seems to see something and reaches toward it, and he, maybe an image of Emma, his wife. His breathing goes quiet, and the camera goes black. We hear whispered, "My love," and then silence. The king is dead.
Quite the ending.
Quite the ending. This is absolutely Eileen Shim is the writer of this. Fantastic work. I think easily I don't want to say easily, but I think this is definitely the best episode we've had to date.
Yes, it is. It's not an action-packed episode, but it is, a very talky episode in some way, but it's got some really good performances, and it really digs into the family dynamics.
Yeah, it really does. Really, really strong episode. And I think the introduction of new actors for the older characters works really well. Aegon, Aemon in particular, I think Aemon makes a very strong impression.
Oh yeah.
Helena as well.
It's a bit of a calm before the storm moment, one could say this.
Like ending as it does, it's like, okay, and I mean, just before that
era is done with.
Yeah. So I want to discuss some, changes and choices.
Yeah.
One of the major changes is sort of, a lot of the changes here have to do with sort of changing the time frame of things. They've moved a lot of things around to fit them all into this period. So, for example, in the book, Corlys is 73 years old at this point, I believe.
And like a very spry 73-year-old.
Yes.
That's what he's supposed to be playing. So.
Yeah, and he's struck by a fever that leaves him very ill and sort of bedridden. And it's the advanced age and it's the seriousness of the illness that raises the question.
Yeah, there's no fighting for them at the Stepstones at this time.
They've left it behind. At this time, Corlys is also not actually formally named an heir. It's just sort of Jace is sort of the heir presumptive. Or is it the heir apparent? I can never remember this.
But yes, he has not made a formal announcement because in general you don't have to. I mean, Laenor was his son, and then it would go to his eldest son.
But Rhaenyra decided to suggest to Corlys, Jace will follow me on the Iron Throne. He'll have the Seven Kingdoms. How about make his brother Luke heir? At the same time, Baemon, who is in the book, remember, a nephew. He's the oldest of a half dozen different nephews that Corlys has. Openly says, the children are bastards. I'm the one who's next. Which leaves a question of Baela and Rhaena. Technically speaking, Laena should have followed Laenor's children, and Laena's children should follow her.
Well, he seems to be very much on the idea that it should pass only through the male line. So we'd have to presume that he's a nephew by a brother then, otherwise he's being extremely hypocritical.
No, Corlys had brothers, yes.
Yes. Well, I mean, did he have sisters? We don't know, I guess.
We don't know, but we know for sure he had brothers. Yes. So actually, in response to this, Daemon is dispatched by Rhaenyra to Driftmark, where he beheads Vaemon and takes the body back to Dragonstone, where it's reported, there's no question, there's no questions around it. Like, it's just reported straight, she fed the body to Syrax.
So this is quite, she makes no action to ask him to behead Vaemon. And Syrax misses out on a snack.
Yeah, so no, this is certainly giving it, Daemon is the one, Rhaenyra is a shock to surprise everybody, but she doesn't, denounce it. It's, it was high treason that he was committing by saying what he did when the king had already said, he will have no talk of it.
Yeah.
The other nephews actually end up fleeing to King's Landing. There's another aspect, with Vaemon's wife and children, and they petition Viserys, who then cuts their tongues out for, that of the nephews, for having questioned the legitimacy of the children.
And basically anyone in that party who continued to question the legitimacy.
Yeah, I assume the children and the wives were left alone, but
I'm not sure that's the case, actually.
I'm pretty sure the text is pretty clear. It's the nephews who are making the petition.
Okay, yeah.
So that is a big sort of change, and the timeline of things is kind of is a bit different. It is close to the time of this period. It's actually a few years earlier. It's like I think it's like 126 AC instead of 129.
Yeah.
So they moved it to have this and to kind of combine together this sort of conflict.
Yeah. And obviously having it all in King's Landing as opposed to away from, on Driftmark and Dragonstone, so that you could concentrate the action to that. Like we've said, Viserys' illness on the show is extremely advanced and in many ways quite different from what he suffers from in the book. He did lose a pair of fingers due to an infection after he cut himself on the Iron Throne. But otherwise, these infections and sores that he has all over his body, and the rotting away of one of his cheeks, so you very gruesomely, you see like tendons and you see through the cheek. It's very gruesome. This is all something that's done on the show. He was actually quite stout. He had gout and respiratory problems, and he was able to continue ruling. There's no sense that he was, addled by pain medication or, not quite, maybe starting to go senile or anything like that. He didn't have to hand things over to Otto and Alicent. He did feel that he was too fat to
make
the climb to the Iron Throne, especially, he was easily out of breath and so on. So he held court from his solar, and probably ended up dying from heart failure, I'm guessing.
Heart attack, something like that.
Congestive heart failure seems like a likely one. So they've made him much more ill, and by doing so, they're allowing Otto and Alicent to have a much bigger role in things. And that's probably why, that's why you can have a scenario where Vaemon goes to petition the king. Most likely, Vaemon himself wasn't going to take it to King's Landing, knowing that Viserys was still capable, and because we have Vaemon using that here. He says that it's not the king that rules anymore. It's it's a queen on the Iron Throne. So he uses his weakness. Otherwise, I don't know if he would have dared actually go.
It makes it crazy that he was trying to insist on Driftmark, but I suppose he figured if he had people backing him and rose up and said, "Nope, this is mine," that maybe they could make it a fall complete kind of situation.
It's the nephews then that are the crazy ones to go and put themselves in front of Viserys.
So that really changes the tenor of things in a lot of ways. That there was this that obviously it allows Paddy Considine to do this absolutely wonderful performance. What a way to go out! Really powerful. I was moved several times, especially as I said, when Daemon helped him, I teared up. But that was really well
he
done.
was all teary-eyed.
Yes. Those are the kinds of things that particularly get me. I love that kind of thing, and it just I don't know.
I really like that as well.
It's very well done.
It was very good.
Another big thing was that, it feels big. It's not really that important to the dance as such, but Aegon and Viserys are very, very young.
Yeah.
They look like they're like 3 and 2. I don't know what the age of children are, but unless you plan to do like a further time skip, like where the dance itself is going to take longer on the show than it takes in the books. Aegon's like 9 in the book. Viserys is 7, and this actually is germane to what happens immediately after.
I mean, it is a little bit germane. I mean, we don't want to get into spoilers, but it kind of affects what you can do with them.
Yes, there's one aspect of things that, but they haven't even touched on.
They'll have to change things a bit there. In
I would guess so, unless they're gonna make it like do another jump or something. I just don't see how there's room for it though. I don't.
But certainly afterwards, especially since, Viserys in the book is one of those extremely precocious children who has a son by the time he's 14. Right?
I think he's younger actually. I think isn't it like 11 or 12?
Well, that might have been the marriage, but
yes, okay. But anyways,
so if they're making him a few years younger, he's gonna be a father at 7 or 8, which is
I've heard of this.
I've
heard of this. I don't know about go, but I've heard of this, and I think in sort of you hear stories and read stories of tribal places in Afghanistan, or India, the youngest father, youngest mother, or. But anyways, that is quite the change.
So I think that they will have to tweak some things there. We also have some structural and timing changes, like with the Baela and Rhaena betrothal.
Yes,
that is proposed here. It has in fact been a thing already.
For like if we say that now is about 129, which is what it was in the books, because of various reasons, they've kind of fuddled around the time a bit, so I'm not quite sure if 129 is right, but if it is, the betrothal in the books is 118, so it's been a decade. So obviously I can see why they moved it to make it a gambit, a thing that Rhaenyra offers, because and similarly.
Otherwise, there's no question that Rhaenys and Corlys are going to support her, even if they feel like those aren't really Rhaenyra's kids.
Yeah,
Rhaenyra's children are also involved, and the betrothal was arranged by Rhaenyra and Laena.
I assume that it was done. I really think that. Corlys was definitely involved. It's not mentioned, but they wouldn't have wanted again to go against their daughter's wishes and say, we will break up this betrothal because we are no longer going to support Rhaenyra. So these changes are clearly to make it more in question, more dramatic.
who will support who and so on. Kind of playing it like we've got for a while there, three sides. That you have the Valarians, you have Rhaenyra, and you have the Greens.
Yeah, I mean, I guess the previous episode introducing the discussion between Rhaenys, and Corlys about, where she's advocates Baela being named, is setting up this moment basically. But they figured, okay, we'll make the stakes such that there's a thing a tangible thing that can be offered to win her over, and you've got Alicent trying to convince her
Yes,
as
because
well.
that conversation in the previous episode would have been pointless if Baela was already betrothed to Lucerys, who was going to be the next Lord of the Tides. So yeah.
So next is some background. We have a couple kind of interesting ones, I think. The scene with Princess Rhaenys watching as the Silent Sisters work on the body of Daemon as they prepare him for the body being taken to Driftmark. It was an interesting one because I think it's the longest we've seen the Silent Sisters at any point in a single scene. The Silent Sisters are an ancient order of the faith, and they swear vows of silence. They're contrary to the rumors, the popular rumor that actually they cut out their tongues. They just swear as binding vow, and they live like a super simple ascetic life of prayer, contemplation. They eat. They don't eat meat. They have rough spun. They have this very harsh kind of life, and there's considered like the handmaidens of a stranger, his brides, because they traditionally tend to the dead, preparing them for sort of their final rest. And actually, we see in the scene like an incision is being made into his belly, and the reason for that is they don't embalm. They don't have embalming fluids. So what they do instead is, this is very medieval. They will pull out all the internal organs. They'll stuff the body with like sweet smelling, herbs, with the idea that it'll cover up the stink as the body starts
So
rotting.
not like a turkey then.
No, not like a turkey. We also are given other examples of where they have, I believe we do this with Ned Stark's remains.
Yes.
Ned Stark's, the flesh is stripped from the bones, and the bones are what are sent back. So to be interred in the sort of tombs that the Starks have.
I wonder whether that is standard just when you're shipping people long distance, or if it's different for like people who have different burial customs.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, even Archbishop Aemon is sort of preserved in a cask of Summer Isles rum, I believe. We see alcohol, so kind of keep it preserve it until we get to land, because they're still sailing and so on.
Yeah.
So
there are some people who say that'd be the way to
pickled.
See, much easier to let your dragon eat them.
Yeah. So
much less work.
the Silent Sisters, they welcome widows joining them. That's probably fairly common that widows make up their number who decide they've they're done with children, or they don't have a husband, they don't have any other. Don't feel they have a purpose in life, and they devote themselves to the faith.
Yeah.
This is obviously all very much following medieval practices with nuns and monks and so on. Very common for like some at a certain period, like the 12th, 13th century, for certain lords or sons to kind of at a certain point in time just decide, I'm done with it. I'll go and become a monk and leave things to my children And sort of on that vein, I guess we have the Hightowers and the Faith.
Yes, because it's quite interesting. We see Rhaenyra and Daemon being surprised as they return to the Red Keep after their long absence, and it has been redecorated. There's an awful lot of 7-pointed stars. We see decorations basically that look now that like the Red Keep will look in Game of Thrones.
Particularly the behind the Iron Throne, I think.
Yes, the big 7-pointed star there. And Alicent, she's wearing a big 7-pointed star and looking extremely pious on some occasions.
Yeah.
I particularly like one still that has been released ahead of the episode, where they've got one still of the greens and one still of the blacks, and she is looking just so dour and pious that it's like
very saintly kind of
Yes, indeed. So she has embraced the faith as the good proper queen is how she's trying to portray herself. And the Hightowers do have a long connection with and quite colourful history together with the Fates.
Yeah, in origin they are first men, or at least some say otherwise, but the first men, at least from the time of the first men, they were around. And Lord Daemon Hightower was the first lord of the Hightower to accept the Seven. He actually was grandson of an Andal princess. So we're talking like sometime in the first centuries after the Andals invaded. That this has happened, and he built the first sept in Old Town. He built a number of others, I think 5 or 6 others in his domain. And then when he died, a septon named Robeson was regent for his infant son Tristan, and Tristan would end up becoming extremely devout under Robeson's influence, and he would raise a Starry Sept, and Robeson is considered the first High Septon. The Starry Sept is it's at this time certainly it's the grandest sept in the Seven Kingdoms, and it's the seat of the High Septon, basically.
So in a sense, I mean, they make it possible for the faith, or they very much facilitate the rise of the faith by giving them the room in Old Town to become a base, and for the first High Septon to come out.
Yeah, we don't have much of a sense of. I mean, we have a sense of Andal warriors coming and bringing with them, priests, septons, but we don't have much of a sense of organization. Septons seem to serve various lords or in various sort of groups, but it doesn't seem they had any kind of central organization.
No, that seems to have come out of this, which is quite making the Hightowers very important for.
Yeah, I mean, it's the Old Town is Rome, really, in a lot of ways.
And many centuries later, when Aegon the Conqueror and his sisters approached Old Town, a vision, the High Septon claimed that he had a vision that he received while praying for wisdom that led Lord Hightower to throw the gates open and accept the Targaryens as rulers of the Seven Kingdom. Very convenient vision, that.
I mean, he prayed for a long time, contemplating it. Like,
contemplating 3 very large dragons, and
I think seeing a vision of basically everything destroyed and so on. So
good choice. So Aegon then dated the beginning of his reign not from his landing on the shores of Westeros, but from when the High Septon anointed him and crowned him in Old Town. So making that again very important.
And more recently, Alicent is not the first Hightower to be a queen. Maegor took a second wife after Cerise Hightower. This was a second wife while Cerise was still alive, by the way, because she wasn't providing him heirs, and the faith ended up rising in rebellion. Actually, the High Septon was her uncle or great uncle, as I recall, and the Hightowers, of course, being kin, kind of supported them. And then, this whole war happens, and eventually Maegor and his mother fly on Dragonback with Balerion and Vhagar, and however, they discover cities open to them, and the Targaryen banner flying, because the Hightowers surrender. Because conveniently, very strangely, the High Septon, who had been denouncing Maegor, who had been fomenting this whole thing, had suddenly died in the night. And there are various stories in Fire and Blood and the World of Ice and Fire discussing this incident. Various claims are made about who might have been responsible. Lots of the Maesters suspect that it was not a natural death.
No, it may indeed have had something to do with the Hightowers as well. That they realized again that those 2 dragons. Not a good idea. We'd like to keep our town uncooked.
Yeah. Last but not least, let's just talk dragons. We've got a couple little trivia bits to discuss.
Yeah, not much seen of the dragons, but we see an egg at least.
Yeah.
So we have Rhaenyra mentioning that she's going to come back on Dragonback. She's going to sail back with her family, I guess, and then return to King's Landing on Dragonback and from Dragonstone. And how fast exactly does a dragon fly between King's Landing and Dragonstone?
I realize that when we were discussing this, we didn't discuss, of course, as I understand it, because I know you asked me then, the TV show ends up having some really crazy flights happening.
Well, the dragons seem to have flown, Drogon in particular, seems to have flown very, very, very fast between the Wall and King's Landing on some occasions. And let's not talk about the fact that they didn't have any saddles. And I think some people calculated that it would be like at the speed of a 747 or something. And Danny hanging on for dear life.
I think I saw someone when I was researching a little bit on this, because I had numbers as well, but I just wanted to see what others said. And someone said that past a certain speed, the human lung can't really take in air properly. So, yeah.
But let's leave that aside and see what possibly could be possible on the show in House of the Dragon. We can sort of make a ballpark estimate, but the larger the dragon is, the slower they will probably be after a certain point, because that's a lot of mass to move. We do have examples of Aegon the Conqueror flying to Dragonstone and then returning the next morning. So it suggests that Balerion could cover some 50 miles in about some 50 miles per hour. That would be some 80 kilometers per hour. And another example is that when Jaehaerys, the Old King, and Good Queen Alysanne traveled on Vermithor and Silverwing to go from King's Landing to Old Town, that's some 1,000 miles, the journey. They staged across 3 days, so they too could fly somewhere in the range of 50 miles per hour. Syrax is a much smaller and swifter dragon than Balerion, and she might be able to do somewhat higher speeds, but without clear examples, it's hard. We know that Rhaenyra and Daemon would race their dragons
between Driftmark and Dragonstone,
and Laena would race as well. So they certainly can fly long distances and keep airborne for quite a while, it seems.
Yeah, for sure. 300-400 miles in a day doesn't seem to be a problem at all. One has to assume, I mean, they need to eat. The people need to be able to eat and do everything. So I would imagine like 8 hours.
There's no bathroom on the dragons?
No, I don't think so. I mean, I guess you can make the saddle could be like a toilet as well, but you kind of.
Yeah.
But yeah, no.
And also, they can't fly too high up, I guess, because it's going to get cold.
Yeah, there's got to be a limit to the height that they will go in general. Obviously, I mean, we know, for example, that the Targaryens flew around the Red Mountains when they were fighting with Dornish, looking for people.
How would it feel when you're on a dragon and it's flying 50 miles per hour and it's
quite a lot of wind chill. I presume that they dress warmly for it, basically.
Yeah.
And it's probably not too comfortable.
No, it doesn't seem like it would be terribly comfortable, actually. Nothing new.
Obviously, they don't have to fly that speed. They can go slower, presumably.
Yeah.
50 is sort of...
But if you're talking about, needing to go somewhere in a hurry, I guess you can put on some warm clothes.
And then to kind of wrap it all up, so how did this whole Dragonlord business get started?
It was prompted by the fact that we see Daemon doing some dragon farming, essentially.
Yeah, ranching, basically. To me, it's very funny because that's it's a great scene in that it's this very fantastical version of the English country lord going out, overseeing, the
new horse, the new foal-born, or the
new lambs, shearing, and getting their hands in and helping out. So he's there literally going and plucking out eggs to hand to the dragon keepers. It's a fun scene in that sense that I don't know if that's how they did things, but it's fun in just kind of associating it to that kind of
that
thing.
lifestyle. Yeah.
So we really don't know the origins, at least not yet. It's lost to legend and myth. Something that dragon lords actually have dragon blood in their veins. We're told that dragon lords were able to use spells, and especially magical horns, which is a thing that allegedly features in A Song of Ice and Fire, to help bind dragons to them. There's different stories actually about the origins of dragons and the relationship to the Valyrians. The Valyrians themselves said that dragons first sprang out of the 14 Flames, the ring of volcanoes that sort of dominated Valyria. There are claims in Ashai, on the other hand, that a long-forgotten, nameless people were actually the first team dragons, and that they taught this to the Valyrians, and then they disappeared from history. Septon Barth, much more recently, of course, speculates that the Valyrian sorcerers created dragons using wyverns and perhaps maybe also fireworms. But fireworms are these fireworms that exist beneath the volcanoes and are allegedly very dangerous.
A little bit shades of the dragons in Anne McCaffrey's Pern books there, which it's sort of a science fictional setting in the sense that humans have colonized a planet, and the problem with this red fall, these poisonous spores from space.
Oh, yeah.
And they actually find that there are these little lizards that I forget what it is about their abilities that.
Can they teleport or something?
Yes, it gets complicated later on. It turns out that they can move through time as well, and that they don't actually fly. They teleport. They teleport little instances like this, basically. But the idea is that they bred these small lizards into
the dragons
that they ride.
Did they breed them, or did they like genetically engineer them?
Possibly. I think there's some genetic engineering going on there. So maybe we're talking sorceress genetic engineering.
I think so.
And also, there are little possible evidences for the fact that there might be some dragon genes spliced into the Valyrians.
Yes, that's actually a good point. That maybe
we're not going to spoil anything, but
if you read the books, if you read Fire and Blood, you know what we're referring to.
Yes.
We'll see if we get the opportunity to discuss that for later episodes.
But yes, there are some little hints that there may indeed be some genetic material in those humans that shouldn't be there.
Now, the one thing contra Barf and this claims that dragons are from Valyria, or dragons are only from came from beyond the Shy, is there seems to be evidence. It's cited in the World of Ice and Fire that remains of dragons have been found as far as north as Ib, as far south as Sophorios. So it could be that now the Sophorios one is interesting because obviously wyverns are in Sophorios. So like how does someone are there paleontologists of the era kind of looking? No, this is definitely a wyvern. This is definitely a dragon. Yes. So but anyways, that is the idea. But
I want to be a Westerosi paleontologist now.
And actually, years ago, when we were doing the heraldry, I asked George about how to depict the dragons of House Vance's arms, and said, we use a dragon, but does it look right? It had 4 limbs, and said on the theory that surely they didn't really see dragons when they made their heraldry thousands of years ago, and George I think said, there are dragons all over one, so including presumably remain in Westeros that have been killed off and vanished for some reason. Obviously that's an off the cuff thing he said in an email. He may have changed his mind, but it's still in the World of Fire we have the bit about dragons having such a wide range. So
it's climate change, wipe them out. We've got to watch. I mean, look here. Have you seen any dragons lately?
No. Well, yes, I have my Dracarys app. I can see a bunch of them flying around. Our dragons are now both adults and are extremely large, and lots of dragons show up whenever you call them out to look at them.
It's really quite cool.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, we've gotten back to this, and again, we're not reviewing, but this was a good episode.
This was a really good episode,
and there's a couple of moments that are real standouts. Like we didn't cover this under the changes directly, but I still do have issues with the Rhaenyra and Alicent portrayals.
Yeah.
In that they are pulling down the animosity.
Yes, yes, I think
we see a very antagonistic scene at one point, and then they kind of get back to being friendly with one another again. But of course, Viserys' ill health means that Rhaenyra can she has to go and praise Alicent for being such a devoted wife to him. There's none of that. That's not really warranted in the book. So they've created a situation where it's more likely that they will have these lingering feelings of friendship, and that there are things that keep reminding them of it. So I still not really on board with that, even though I see where they've gotten it to it. On the other hand, like I said, the scene with Daemon and Viserys, it's that's really good.
His Viserys' speech to his family at that was very moving as well. I was thinking about it.
And then Aemon delivering the famous toast.
Yeah.
I mean, he is just such a grade A smarmy arse.
Yes.
He's really fantastic, and you can see, and this I think they are setting up a distinct parallel between Damon and Aemon with that D that has just moved from the front to the back of the name.
I mean, you have two instances directly of that. One at the scene before the Iron Throne, where Aemon seems a bit impressed by his uncle.
Yep, like yeah.
Okay, yeah, and then at the feast when Damon helps intervene and stop fighting, and they pair off against one another. And
he sent Lucerys and Jacaerys off to bed, and Aemon is being told to go to his quarters as well, and there is a little bit of a stare down there.
Yeah,
and,
but Aemon is the one who looks away and goes. So I find that interesting.
Yes,
but you can see Damon like this kid is like.
He's way too similar. He is way too similar.
I know what this kid's like. I know.
Yeah. And I have to say that the scene that they do with Lucerys and Jacaerys, I was going to call them Luke and Jake because I stumble over those names all the time. I understand why they shorten them. When they go into the practice yard.
Yeah.
And Aemon is there practicing with Kristen Cole he's got, no armor, no shield, and Cole swinging his bloody morning star at him at full force, basically. And as soon as they stop fighting, he's kind of I don't think he even turns around like some, nephews, are you here to spar? Basically, he's taking it in without. They do a really good job of making him seem extremely badass there.
Yeah.
He does. He knows that they are there, and he doesn't bother turning around. And they weren't interested in sparring with him for some reason.
Great stuff. So that leaves us with that episode closes, and we are off to 2 more episodes. And these, I think, should almost be understood as like 2 halves of a long episode.
Yes, it's the Green Council and the Black Queen.
So I think it's pretty clear that we're going to see the King's Landing side of a story immediately in the aftermath of Viserys' death, and then we're going to see the Dragonstone side of a story. So that'll be really interesting.
Yeah, it will be something to look forward to, definitely.
Until then, bye.